LSU lands a quarterback out of the transfer portal. Is he Garrett Nussmeier's heir apparent? We're talking about him. Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, where you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We got a ton of transfer portal talk to delve into. LSU did host a really big-time edge rusher on Sunday. We'll talk about that. Basketball Tigers lost over the weekend. We'll get you the absolute latest. But I want to start with the most significant news in the transfer portal so far. Not short-term, but long-term. And because it's the most significant position on the field in organized team sports. On Sunday, LSU landed a commitment from Michael Van Buren. I will tell you about Michael Van Buren in a second, okay? Spent his freshman season at Mississippi State, entered the transfer portal. I'll tell you much more about him in just a second. But there are some people who, some of the immediate reaction I saw was, what does this mean for Colin Hurley, the future of the position? I want to remind you, go back, not too far, just a couple of weeks. Brian Kelly, at his Monday press conference after Vanderbilt, so previewing the Oklahoma week, this was Monday after Bryce Underwood's flip. So Bryce Underwood flips from LSU to Michigan on a Thursday. Tigers play Vanderbilt on Saturday. They get the win. Monday, Brian Kelly's meeting with reporters, and he's asked, I know you can't talk about players specifically, meaning recruits at that point because they hadn't signed, but do you think you'll still take a quarterback in this year's class? And what was the plan there? This is what Brian Kelly said. Remember, after the Bryce Underwood flip, before LSU played Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think we'll always look at taking a quarterback each year, and we'll most likely take a quarterback again this year. We look at the calendar year a little bit differently than just, December. We have a February signing period. We have a transfer portal. So we'll continue to look at that and see how that best fits our roster. But I can tell you this, that the overall roster is much more important than one particular position. As much as we want to take a quarterback at this position, I think what's more important is the overall health of the roster. And so if it ends up being that we do take a quarterback, that's great. But I think our eye is on the strength of the entire roster.
Okay, a few things that Brian Kelly said there that I want to make sure we hone in on. First, he started by saying, I think we'll always look at taking a quarterback. So that's something you have to start with. Every year, understand the objective is you're going to take a quarterback every single year. You want 4 scholarship quarterbacks on your roster. If you're taking a quarterback every year, then you'll have 4 scholarship quarterbacks on your roster. Now, we also said we don't look at it as a calendar year, right? Meaning it's not just in 2024. Because, yes, you had the early signing period in 24. You have this transfer portal. You have the February signing period, and then you have a spring portal window as well. So there's lots of different opportunities for LSU to take a quarterback. And what he was saying was, don't freak out if there's not a quarterback that signs with LSU on the early signing period after Bryce Underwood's flip. And that was the case. Now, LSU did get in on Bryce Baker. So Bryce Baker was the quarterback who was a highly regarded high school player, was committed to North Carolina. When Mack Brown was fired, he decommitted. LSU and Penn State were the two that got most heavily in the mix. Well, over the weekend, after North Carolina hired Bill Belichick, Bryce Baker announced he was sticking with his commitment to North Carolina and would sign with the Tar Heels. So that was no longer an option for LSU. Enter Michael Van Buren. So Michael Van Buren spent the 2024 season with Mississippi State. And I want to go deeper into that. But remember, as Brian Kelly said, they're going to sign a quarterback every year. And he also talked about what's more important being the overall health of the roster. So again, the context of what he said there was about the money it was going to cost to get Bryce Underwood. And what was more important was saying, we're not going to dump all of those resources into one player. As great and special as he is, we got to build our whole roster. And you're already seeing that manifest right now in this portal window so far, with now 5 either signees or commitments for LSU, key positions, impact guys as well. So what he was talking about there is coming to life. They are focusing on building this entire roster. But part of that is you have to add a quarterback every year. So a lot of people are wondering, what does this mean for Colin Hurley? Well, it means he's going to have to compete for the job, which we knew anyway, provided he sticks around. But you can't assume a quarterback in this day and age is going to stick around. So you have to protect yourself against that. Plus, you've got to consider always that that college football roster building is now like the NFL. And I don't mean that as a cliche. It's like, oh, it's the NFL. It's like every year, every player is a free agent for all intents and purposes. Imagine if every year, every player in the NFL was a free agent and they go test the market. That's basically what you have now. Every year, every player can leave. So you want to build relationships and you want to build loyalty and you want to develop those players, but you also have to protect yourself against the possibility or even probability of them leaving. So it's more important now than ever to make sure you're adding a quarterback every single year. So who is Michael Van Buren? Well, he's 6'1", 200 pounds, spent his true freshman season this year at Mississippi State. Remember, Mississippi State hired Jeff Lebby, who was the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss, then became the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, then was hired as the head coach at Mississippi State. Wide open spread, a really bright offensive guy. And Michael Van Buren was the freshman he signed in this most recent class in 2024. But they also added Blake Shapen. So remember, Blake Shapen was the starting quarterback at Baylor when Dave Aranda and Baylor won the Big 12. So Blake Shapen was the starting quarterback at Baylor. He entered the transfer portal. He lands at Mississippi State. So Jeff Lebby, year one, has his transfer, veteran guy in Blake Shapen, and his freshman, his future, in Michael Van Buren. Well, Blake Shapen gets injured. And Michael Van Buren ends up starting 7 games for Mississippi State. He played in 9. He started 7. He finished the season with over 18, just under 1,900 passing yards, threw for 11 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, ran for another 5 touchdowns. And by the way, all 9 games, 8 of the 9 games he played in were against SEC opponents. The only non-SEC opponent he played against was UMass. And that day he was 14 of 25 for 222, a touchdown, no picks. He was sacked 3 times. By the way, on the season, he was sacked 27 times. Mississippi State was atrocious. They were the worst team in the SEC. They were winless in the SEC, and they had a freshman quarterback playing for a bulk of the season. And Van Buren had some very nice moments, but he had some struggles, as you might imagine, as well. It's also worth noting that Michael Van Buren is from St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, Maryland. And LSU has gone up to St. Francis to recruit players. Deshaun Womack, who's now at Ole Miss, but Deshaun Womack was from St. Francis Academy. Remember Jordan Tolles, the defensive back. LSU signed him out of St. Francis Academy back in the 2021 class. So LSU has gotten players out of St. Francis, and my assumption is in signing Deshaun Womack 2 classes ago, they also had the opportunity to see Michael Van Buren. So there's at least a little familiarity there as well. With Van Buren in tow, there's kind of this question now about what does that mean for him in 2025 and then the future of the LSU quarterback position. I want to touch on that, and we'll get into that next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So we all know Garrett Nussmeier is going to be LSU starting quarterback in 2025. And God willing, he stays healthy and has an awesome season like many of us think he can and will. But when you look at the quarterback position at LSU for 2025 and beyond, how does that look? Well, certainly just when you look at 2025, you'll have A.J. Swan, who will be entering his 4th year of college. Remember, Swan spent 2 years at Vanderbilt, the 2024 season at LSU. Now he'll be entering his 4th collegiate season, his 2nd at LSU. The asterisk caveat there is also worth mentioning that A.J. Swan could leave after the spring if he doesn't enter the portal window. Now, after spring, he could choose to leave as well if he wants to go find a place where he might be able to play. That's not altogether unprecedented. I mean, we saw Joe Burrow leave Ohio State, come to LSU in the spring, after the spring of 2018. When Joe Burrow came to LSU, we saw Justin McMillan and Lowell Narcisse leave LSU. That was in fall camp, as a matter of fact. So nothing is a given, but let's go ahead and assume you'll have A.J. Swan as a 4th-year player, Michael Van Buren and Colin Hurley as 2nd-year players, and then, of course, Garrett Nussmeier as your unquestioned, undeniable starting quarterback. The real question would be the battle for backup. With Ricky Collins gone, is A.J. Swan that guy, or is Michael Van Buren, who's started 7 SEC games as a freshman and is maybe a little more dynamic, certainly more dynamic athlete, better arm than A.J. Swan, does he assume that role as Garrett Nussmeier's backup? That's something that we'll see how that plays out in time. The real question, I think, because we all understand that Nuss is the guy in 2025, is what does 2026 and beyond look like? And I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse and get way too ahead of myself here, but if you just assume everyone stays in place, well, when Nussmeier leaves after 2024, after 2025, then in 2026, A.J. Swan would be in his 5th year. Michael Van Buren would be in his 3rd year, as would Colin Hurley. And I think maybe what I've heard most commonly from sort of the LSU contingent in reaction to LSU bringing in Michael Van Buren, it's, well, what about Colin Hurley? You don't need this guy. You have Colin Hurley. A couple things that I would suggest. Number one, first of all, Colin Hurley showed up on campus at 16 years old. And as mature emotionally as he is, and even physically, let's not forget the scale and magnitude of development from 16 to 17 to 18. Like, you don't have to be a college football player to know anything about it. You just have to be a human. Like, you listening, watching, at some point, you were 16 years old, provided you're older than that. And then you were 17, and then you were 18, and then you were 19. And think about your personal physical development and emotional development and everything. It's one of the reasons I don't like reclassifying. If you're a super smart kid and you get all your credits done and you could start college early or finish college early, God bless you. But I'm not talking about your academic prowess. I'm talking about physical ability on Saturdays to go play in the Southeastern Conference. Why would you rush that? It doesn't make any sense to me. And to everyone saying, we got a backup quarterback in Colin Hurley, I want to remind you, you have not seen anything of Colin Hurley. You have not. All you have seen of Colin Hurley is a little bit in the spring game last year. And if you got to the stadium early enough to watch pregame warmups, that's it. That's all you have seen. Okay? And I'm not being combative. I'm just being very honest here. You can make an assumption about what you think you know. But the coaches see him at practice every single day. And I got to watch Colin Hurley a ton in fall camp. And he ain't anywhere near ready to play. My eyes told me that, and people within the program I've had conversations with have told me the same thing. And you don't have to believe me or that. What's the thing I say often? Actions speak louder than words. If this coaching staff was ready to say, Colin Hurley, next, you're ready, they wouldn't be going after Michael Van Buren. Yes, they would add a quarterback, but not a quarterback who has starting experience in the SEC. You'd be going after a high school quarterback, an FCS quarterback, a body, a camp arm, someone who slots in below Colin Hurley that's not a threat or a risk to take his spot. What you've done is taken a guy that I'm assuming today is your number 2 quarterback. When LSU goes to Clemson, if Garrett Nussmeier turns an ankle, God forbid, Michael Van Buren's going to the game and should go in the game. The real question with respect to Colin Hurley is, will he stay? And provided he does, how much will he continue to develop? Because there's certainly the possibility that Hurley will surpass Michael Van Buren. But let me pose you, LSU fan, the question of the hypothetical that I just laid out. If LSU's playing Clemson in the opener in 2025, and God forbid Garrett Nussmeier turns an ankle, who you want running on the field? You saw A.J. Swan against Oklahoma. You want to see that? You want Colin Hurley, who's never taken a snap? Or do you want a guy who played 9 games, started 7 in the SEC, threw for nearly 200 yards, 11 touchdowns, and got a baptism by fire? Who would you rather run out onto the field? You know the answer. You know the answer. That's why you go add Michael Van Buren. In a different day and age of college football, of course, you're not adding a quarterback in the portal. But in a different age, Ricky Collins is still here. And in a different age, you're still landing Bryce Underwood. But you live in an era right now in college football where every player, every year, is a free agent. And it's not just about playing time. It's about going to test the market to see what your market value is. So, just like those players can go test the market every year to see if they can get better playing time, more money, better situation, whatever, okay. So too do coaches building a roster have to consider every year every portal window, every recruiting window, how can I make my roster better? Because you have to look at it through an NFL prism. You're never staying the same. You're getting better or you're getting worse. So how are you improving? Michael Van Buren makes your quarterback room more talented, deeper, more experienced. It makes you better, period. It's absolutely the right thing to do. And quarterback, just like every position on a roster, is going to be a year-to-year proposition. And I'm still going to sit here today and suggest that when Garrett Nussmeier leaves after the 2025 season, LSU needs to go into the transfer portal and get someone with major starting experience for 2026, because why not? And if Michael Van Buren or Colin Hurley or A.J. Swan, whomever beats him out, awesome. But why would you not pursue Dylan Gabriel or Cam Ward or Riley Leonard or a guy that started 40 football games? Because you can. You're never staying the same. You're getting better. You're getting worse. So keep getting better. Michael Van Buren makes you better. Okay. It is Locked on LSU. Well, now I got a final break. LSU had another big-time visitor on Sunday. I want to tell you about him. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Y'all, it is just about time. It is that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon Eastern. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. So, of course, the big news over the weekend was Michael Van Buren committing to LSU. You're going to add a quarterback that's always going to be noteworthy. But on Sunday, LSU is also hosting Jack Pyburn. Now, Jack Pyburn is an outside linebacker who spent the past 3 seasons at the University of Florida. In 2022, played in 8 games as a true freshman, all as a backup. In 2023, played in 8 games with 1 start, but had an injury. So he finished the season with 17 tackles and 1 TFL. But in 2024, played in every game, starting the last 8 games of the season, and was second on Florida's team with 60 tackles. Also had 4 TFLs, a sack, and an interception. He kept getting better. In the game against LSU, Jack Pyburn logged 8 tackles, whereas number 44 is an outside linebacker. So he visited LSU on Sunday. I was told he went to dinner on Sunday night at Ruffino's with Blake Baker and Kevin Peoples with his family as well. So he's serious, and he's taken a couple of SEC visits. 6'3", 265, again, entering his 4th season of college football. And, one of the big pieces of information, or one of the, big additions over the weekend was Jamari Butler. So Jamari Butler is the defensive end from Nebraska, who we talked about him, right? 6'5", 265. Well, you look at Jack Pyburn, 6'3", 265. You're talking about big ends. You're not talking about Braden Swinson, the long, lean, athletic, bend the edge guy. You're talking about bigger physical guys that can set the edge and help in run support, as opposed to just the one-trick pony. I know a lot of people were very disappointed with Deshaun Womack entering the transfer portal. And I'm not here to tell you Deshaun Womack isn't a good player or wouldn't have made an impact. Deshaun Womack did make an impact, but he was a one-trick pony. And again, you'd love to have Deshaun Womack. He's a very good edge rusher, and you need pass rushers, but he's not a 3-down lineman because he's not big enough to help against the run. So he's a situational pass rusher. He's a very good one. But what you're looking for, guys that can be on the field every down, who can rush the passer, the hybrids, who can rush the passer and help you in run defense. And Jack Pyburn is that guy. So look at what you're losing at defensive end. Braden Swinson, senior. Savion Jones, super senior, 285. Paris Shand, who is so versatile for you inside and out. And remember, Deshaun Womack hit the portal. So here's who you have coming back. Gabe Relaford in his sophomore season. Kalaj Cobbins, who didn't play this year, he'll be a redshirt. Dylan Carpenter, redshirt freshman. And then Princeton Malbrew. Princeton Malbrew tore his ACL, didn't play this season, but he transferred in from Northwestern State. So this is his 3rd year at LSU. But again, a guy that's probably more of a rotational piece. That's why when we went through our wants, needs, and musts, defensive end was a must for LSU. I think Gabe Relaford is going to be a really good player for LSU. And I also think Kalaj Cobbins is going to be a total menace coming off the edge. Now, nobody saw Kalaj Cobbins play this year, but I saw him in fall camp. And if you actually care to do it, you can. You can go back and listen to all our fall camp reports here on Locked on LSU. And time and again, when they went through pass rush drills, I highlighted Kalaj Cobbins because no one could block him. He was awesome coming off the edge. He's just kind of like Womack, more diminutive guy, isn't going to be an every down defensive end yet, and also a guy that was behind Braden Swinson, and Deshaun Womack. So there just weren't going to be a lot of reps. But I'm telling you, that's a name to remember. But Relaford, Cobbins, Carpenter, Malbrew coming off an ACL. The point is, you don't have any skins on the wall. And while I think all those guys could develop and become really good players, right now, none of them have the skins on the wall. And the portal allows you to go get veterans. I want to remind you what Brian Kelly said. What Brian Kelly said a week ago, after the Oklahoma game, when he said, we can't keep running out there with 5 freshmen and a sophomore like they did on defense. They've got to be more veteran. Well, how do you be more veteran? You develop your young guys that you recruited out of the high school ranks until they become veteran players, and you accelerate it by going to the transfer portal. Exactly what LSU's doing. You've already landed Jamari Butler, who's entering his 6th year of college. And now you got Jack Pyburn on campus, who's entering his 4th year of college. You got veteran in a hurry replacing Swinson and Jones. Now, you got to land Jack Pyburn. You haven't done that yet. But that's exactly the kind of player you need, because you could envision a reality where Pyburn and Jamari Butler are your starters, with Gabe Relaford and Kalaj Cobbins and Dylan Carpenter all rotating, and they may not even be done. So that's worth keeping an eye on as they move throughout. And the other asterisk here is what happens with Harold Perkins. Been telling you for weeks, for almost a month now, I had a conversation where there were 3 players, 3 veterans that LSU thought they had a good chance to get back. And it was Mason Taylor, Emory Jones, and Harold Perkins. And at the time, I told you it's unrealistic to think you're going to get all 3 of them. You'd love to get 2, but in reality, if you get 1, that's a win. Well, Emory Jones and Mason Taylor are already off to the draft. The last one standing is Harold Perkins. And everything that I've heard, it's like it's leaning toward him coming back. That could change. It could change in an instant. But that's a wild card. You could have Harold Perkins back as well, helping you bend the edge. So something worth filing away. But we'll keep an eye on Jack Pyburn, who is on campus, on LSU's campus on Sunday. And it almost having dinner with Blake Baker and Kevin Peoples. But it's almost like free agency, where like NFL free agency, where the old adage is like when a player's taking a free agent visit, you never let them leave. Right? They're coming to visit your facility, your organization. You never want them to leave. You want to make sure they sign their contract before they leave. And if they leave without signing a contract, it's usually not a good sign. So we'll see what happens with Jack Pyburn. But LSU did have him on campus on Sunday, and we'll let you know how it goes. Okay, before we get out of here, just a quick note. LSU over the weekend, the basketball team did drop a game to SMU 74-64. Look, LSU, kind of one of their real the feathers in their cap has been that they've been exceptional in the second half. Now, part of that is out of necessity. Against Alabama State, against Charleston Southern, against UCF, they were down in the first half and needed big second half rallies. Well, against SMU on Saturday, Tigers led by 6 at halftime, and then they got absolutely drubbed in the second half. They committed 13 second half turnovers and were just 2 of 8 from 3 in the second half. So it was unfortunate. They got outscored 47-31 in the second half. So you got outscored by 16 in the second half. And, a 6-point halftime lead turned into a double-digit loss. So the turnovers were a problem for LSU, and SMU won the points in the paint 42-24. They dominated you in the paint. You were awful in the second half. They out-rebounded you 41-31. So it's disappointing that it went that way for LSU, because this was a game you felt like you could win. Now, here's the part that isn't terrible. So SMU's net ranking coming into the game was 42. With the win over LSU, their net goes up to 39. So that is a quality, quote unquote, quality loss for LSU. Of course, you need to win these games. But the Tigers went from 53 to 61 in the net. And when we look ahead at what LSU has for the remainder of the non-conference, you have got to win your next 3 games. This is just non-negotiable. These are 3 bad teams. Just playing these teams is likely going to hurt you immediately in the immediacy in the net, but it's Stetson, UNO, and Mississippi Valley. You've got to win these 3 games. Win these 3 games, get to 11-2 going into conference play, see if you can go 500 in league play thereabouts, and that should get you around 20 wins. It'll have you on the bubble on Selection Sunday, but probably in what is going to be the deepest SEC of my lifetime, certainly of my time covering LSU and covering this league. So Tigers with a disappointing loss on Saturday against SMU, but they need to bounce back with 3 more games in the non-conference. Tuesday at home against Stetson will be the next opportunity. Okay, that'll do it for us here today on today's episode of Locked on LSU. Hey, thanks for making us your first listen. Now for your second listen, go check out Locked on SEC with our guy Chris Gordy. You can find Locked on SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are on podcasts, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.